Hello everyone, and in After Effects today we are going to make a news ticker for covering events and other such footage. I'm Evan Abrams for PremiumBeat.com. This will take place entirely in After Effects, making use of shape layers and some expressions, and when we export it we'll be using alpha channels or taking it directly out of the app to put it into an editor. So let's all get into After Effects and gather together our footage and get ready to make some interesting tickers. So, inside of After Effects, we're going to first create a new composition and make it 1920 by 1080, 24 frames a second from the presets, and give it a nice long duration that you think will cover all of your ticker. Now, in this composition, I want you to pay attention up here to your composition window. Just toggle on and off the opacity grid just so that you're aware that the background isn't black, see-through, so when we export this at the end it's going to be see-through. So a lot of people believe it's going to export black, but that's only if you don't include the alpha, but we will in the end. The first thing to do is create a new shape layer, and this shape layer will need a rectangle and it will need a fill. Change the fill to be 0, 95, 25 to get that nice deep red that imitates the BBC quite nicely. That rectangle, we will change its size, so unlink them and make it 500 by 70. And we're going to position this down in the lower third. And you can toggle some grids and guides here by calling up things like the action and title safe and the proportion grid. So the proportion grid, you can see you need it to be below this line here to be within the lower third of the frame. But we also need to be aware of the title and action safe because we want these things to be visible on all TVs, so we don't want to put it below the action safe, and if it's below the title safe there's a high probability people can't read it either. So we're going to take the ticker and we're going to put it right down here, just above the lowest bounds we can be at, and we're going to just move it to the side out of frame because we're going to start its animation coming into frame. Go to its position, P, and hit the stopwatch. It'll set a first keyframe there, and then move ahead 10 frames and then just move it into frame. Right there is good, and we'll just zoom in on those keyframes so we can see how we're working. And this will be the logo bar. Now we're going to need to duplicate that and bring it below the logo bar, and we're going to call this the ticker bar, and the ticker bar will go under the text of the ticker, and that is because when you have moving video with small text on top of it, it becomes very difficult to read. So we're going to take the fill and we're going to change that up to be bright, so 0, 95, maybe 75 should be good enough. Hit UU to pull up all of its attributes, and we know its ending keyframe we want to be 960, comma, and then stay on the same parallel, and then we want its size to be 1920, so that's good. And we know that its start frame will need to be moved off frame as well, and we want to move this layer along so that it comes on only after the logo is animated on, and perhaps move it forward even more so that it takes 10 frames and then comes in. And we could probably extend its animation by about 10 frames, so the layer itself starts at 20 frames, its animation stops at 116. Now the next bar that we're going to make is the lower third bar, which is that white one. So duplicate and then call this the lower third info bar. Change its fill color to be of a saturation 0 and a brightness of 95. Hit UU to call up its size, and you can make it quite large, in fact, 350 for this thing's size, and then just move it along so that it starts after the ticker is all on. And we know its final state we want to be somewhere around here. Perhaps even a little bit lower, but we know its first keyframe we can just delete because it's wrong. We move the playhead back to the start of the frame, and we want it to start just below the top of this and move the layer itself to the bottom of the stack. So it animates coming up like so. We want to cover up the bottom, so we are going to duplicate this layer, and to the duplicate, all up its information and remove the position keyframes and just move it down to be basically where the other layer starts. For the bottom layer, we're going to change its track mat to be alpha inverted of the thing above it, meaning that it will lose all of that alpha information so that when you have a look, you can see, and we can just change its name to be lower third cover. We're going to now select everything, hit U, select all of those keyframes, bring up the graph editor, select everything you have in the graph editor, set them all to be easy eased, and then drag them over so that they are further eased towards the back end, and it creates more interesting motion. So logo comes on, ticker comes on, and then the lower third comes up. Now the next thing to do is to add the text elements. For the lower third information, this is the simplest to add, and we will simply be taking out our text tool and typing out name, last name, and giving it a color. Perhaps everything should be a nice dark black, but you want to avoid pure black and pure white, so we're going to give it a blackness of 5%, and then for the subtitle, comma, position, comma, location, which is basically what you're putting in here, and we're going to just change this to have a color that is more like maybe 50% or 25% dark, and doesn't have to be all caps. Font size is 60 for both, but the bottom could really be something like a 50 because it's not as important as the top stuff. And just make sure it's in a good spot so that the commas and dangling parts of letters doesn't interfere, and you can just change that last keyframe to make it a little bit more appropriate. Move that text layer to be over at the edge of the action and title safe bars. Now move its endpoint to be where the keyframe for the white bar animating up is going to be, and type into the effects and presets typewriter, and then just apply that to the text layer, and you can see it has quick animating on just like a typewriter, and you can go in here and edit this to be whatever you'd like. So now it can be Evan Abrams, and all of the animation attributes are all the same, and you can make this something like at EC Abrams PremiumBeat.com. We will also need to do something for the logo, a simple textual logo, so you can create some squares by just making a new shape layer, calling them squares, and then calling up their properties, making sure it's a rectangle that's about 60 by 60, moving this to be down here, and making sure these layers start only after things have been animated on, changing their scale and rotation to start at 0 and 90 degrees, setting keyframes, moving ahead about 10 frames, and having them end at 100 degrees. And again, we're going to use that same trick where we go into the graph editor, easy ease them, slide those along, just so their animation is slightly more interesting. And then perhaps duplicate this and move it over in space, and then adjust it slightly in time so they come up. And you can move them back to be coming on just as there is space being made for them, so that looks quite nice. Maybe duplicate another one, just move it out a little bit. It's a good thing about duplicating is it doesn't take too much of your time. And that looks good enough, and you can of course put letters there just so that you know what you're looking at. So if we're using my initials, it would be like an E. Make sure you use the color of what's behind it. Stretch it up to kind of fit, like so. And then just duplicate that, make another letter, duplicate that, make another letter, and there we go. And then we will apply the same kind of scale thing that we did. So we'll be scaling these from a 0 up to their final value. Good, and you can copy that scale, paste, paste, and just make sure that these all line up appropriately with each other. And again, we're going to go in, edit all of those keyframes, getting lots of practice editing keyframes. Good, good. So now we have a logo that comes up in good order. We are ready to also have a ticker that comes on. Now, the ticker itself is quite simple, and now that you have all of these elements around, it will look a little bit more embellished. So go to the part where the red bar has come all the way on, and we're going to make a new text layer. Make sure that its color is nice and bright, like a 95, and we are going to type out news items after news items, separating them by hyphens. And for the purpose of this tutorial, I will just copy and paste this several times. Make sure it is all in caps and using a bold font, and then bring it down to be not only in the center of that red bar, but also off frame all the way over there to the right. And set its endpoint to be right there when we want it to start coming across. Call up its position, hold down Alt and click on the position, and we're going to use an expression to determine how quickly this thing comes on. So we're going to set up an X variable, and X equals position, and in square brackets a position of order 0. So we're only going to be looking at the first part of the position array, and then plus in brackets time minus in point, capital P on point, and then multiply that by negative 150. And what this means is we're going to look at the position value, which in this case is 1920, and we're going to add to it the time, which is 40 frames, or 116, subtract the endpoint, which is where the layer starts, and we'll be multiplying that by negative 150, which will serve as the velocity. Semicolon ends it, move on to the next line, y equals position, and then inside square brackets a 1, which means take your position value from just the position value of the property, and then semicolon return, and in square brackets x comma y, and end that out, and you can see it begins scrolling from the endpoint and will continue forever actually. So what we'll do is we'll just go to when the news is all gone, and then we will just hit N to close out the composition, trim the comp to the work area, and then just make sure that this layer is above the ticker bar but below the logo bar so that it comes on and begins ticking along. So this has been essentially the entire tutorial. Now you have to take this element and put it somewhere else. So we discussed briefly alpha channels before. If you want to export this with an alpha channel, meaning have all the space above and below be nothing when you go to put it into an editing program. So what you'll do is you will add this to your render queue, Control M, or you can go composition, add to render queue. And here in the output module, just click on the name, and where it says channels, go to RGB plus alpha, so that you're also including alpha information, which is not available on all codecs, but it is available if you start with lossless and then go there. And lossless is ideal for this kind of thing. Even though it makes giant files, it is very helpful. But another thing to do is if you're going to edit things in Adobe's Premiere program, you will simply import the AEP file and it will retain all of the information. And you'll be able to go back and quickly edit things if you so desire. This has been Evan Abrams for PremiumBeat.com. Come by the blog and see other tips and tutorials in After Effects and other applications. And of course, come to PremiumBeat.com for all of your music and sound effects needs. I'm Evan Abrams. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you around the internet.